Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining in. This session will be hosted by Nikita Patil, who is the Procurement Strategy Lead at PIEV 2022. Nikita, you may begin with your presentation and then you can go ahead and answer the questions that are submitted via the form. Over to you.
Share my screen. Are you able to see it now? I hope it's visible. If it's not, please let me know. So yeah, I'm just gonna start a little bit with a little bit of an introduction about me. I've done my bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Pune University, and I was part of the Formula student team at MIT Pune called Team Axle Racers. Then after graduating, I've worked in the automotive industry for almost 4 years with Mercedes-Benz and Ether Energy, when I decided to sort of shift my industry a bit and study energy engineering to get into the energy sector. And now I work with renewable energy and soon with battery storage, but not for EVs, more like grid storage battery systems. So yeah, and I've been a part of the Formula Bharat team as a cost judge since 2017, and also part of the PIEV challenge, which was earlier FSCV challenge since it started, I think, in 2019. So I'm really happy to be here and to be able to answer your questions. We do have a very good team of judges who help you and guide you throughout the process of this, this competition. So yeah, I hope you make the most of it and we can address most of your questions today regarding the procurement strategy. So I'm going to dive right into it. Yes, we're going to go through all the rule book and the different sections of the rule book. And then, of course, there are some questions that you've already sent to me. I will answer those. And if you have still more, you can, ask. So the main aim of the procurement strategy is to understand the timeline and the costs that are involved in procuring all the components that you require for your EV powertrain system. So that's what we're trying to do, right? I know this is a challenge and a competition, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you understand the actual physical process of doing these things. So it helps you to make a good car when you participate with the car and you want to make your first EV car, which is the case in many of the teams who participate in this challenge. The judging criteria, we base it on different factors such as your strategy, your budget allocation in your EV powertrain, different cost versus performance decision, the timeline, how detailed and how complete and easy to understand your report is, and also your presentation of the content of the documents and your management strategies, procurement management strategies. And all of this is encompassed in this rubric, which all of you have access to. So I would ask you to please read each and every line that's written on this. This is what we also give the judges. So they have the same document that they use to judge your reports. So just to quickly run through it, there are different sections that we have divided this into to make it easier to, classify and categorize things, and also makes it easier for you to concentrate and present these things in a very good way. So it's also like standardized it across the teams, and it's easier for the judges to also go through these documents. So the first thing that we look at is the timeline, your procurement timeline. And again, the points are divided into different categories, like how you have to identify what you're trying to tell, which is the scope through your procurement timeline. It has to be very detailed and clear and complete, which is very important. What happens is, you make your timeline in, say, an Excel or a different software, and when you send it in the report, you have to fit it in one page. So sometimes when you're converting it to PDF or something like, or taking a screenshot, you sort of cut off some of this is a very silly mistake, but a very common mistake that I've seen. You cut off some of the part of the timeline. So we can't judge it if we can't see it, right? And also if you take a screenshot, if it's blurry and we need to, if we zoom in and we can't see, still read what's on it. So you're going to lose points, and that is a lot of points, like it's 10 points. So make sure that when you convert these your timelines to fit it into the report, it is clear and it's easy to read and understand. And also then, of course, there are different components like risk analysis and identification to see, during the year, have you considered different things that could affect your projected timeline? Although timelines are good to have to when you're doing a project, but it is practical that, there's always going to be something that doesn't go according to timeline. So you need to have backup plans. You need to have buffer times on, how to make sure that your final end product is still not affected, even though there might be some delays in between. So you need to factor these in and consider these things. So these kind of things are important to keep in mind. I would suggest that you should definitely look at all these big point things. What are we asking in this? And there are these guiding questions for you to know, like, what you need to present in this. Like in the procurement table, you need to have your procurement management strategy. What do we need by this? Like, have you considered alternative vendors? What is your strategy on selecting vendors? What is your strategy on, getting these things in time? So these kind of things, again, it's open to sort of interpretation to some extent. So we like to see innovation in this. We like to see something that you've done differently, or you're considering on how you select vendors, how you select parts, and things like that. So please make sure you show this in the table so we understand. Whatever you're doing, however little or big, try to make it presentable and try to make it seen in the report. So we can only judge it if we can see it, right? So yes, if you're doing some there's small things to help you better identify, say having if something goes wrong in a very high cost part towards the end during the testing. So what is your strategy to replace these parts? So these kind of things is what we usually are looking for, and seeing how you try to address these problems. Then of course, there's the budget section, which talks about how you've allocated the budget within your EV powertrain. And sometimes, you can also, you can show why you have, what is your total budget for the whole car, and how much have you allocated to the EV, and why, your reasonings behind it, the different subsystems in EV, what money goes to where, and how do you plan to procure this money, or what is your plan to procure this money, and what is your justification, and sort of saying that this is how much we'd need for this subsystem, and trying to make those, for us to understand how you're making these decisions. Again, in the risk management basically pops up in everything, right? Your timeline, your even your money, because you might have a plan to get some money in, but if that doesn't work, usually it's sponsorship. So if it doesn't work out, what is your plan to raise that much funds for, because you still are going to need money to buy parts and things like that. So that's what we're trying to understand. The reasoning is very interesting, because the next section, because it is sort of this page, if you read the rule book, you have 4 pages, and we'll also go through that. The last page is reasoning. So this is, again, a chance for you to show us the different cool things that you're doing to, make sure that your car development and manufacturing is in time and is in line with your plans that you have set before, and not deviating too much. So yeah, you can show us all those things that you are doing in this part. And the last part is the question answer session, which will happen sometime in June, if I'm not mistaken, where you'd have a chance, the judges will have a chance to clarify a few things and, ask you a few more detailed questions about the report that you have submitted. So yeah, so please go through this rubric properly, read every section, try to understand what we're trying to ask here, and address these things in your report. So yeah, so the document has 4 pages, like it's mentioned in the rule book. The first one is usually your timeline, and you can use whatever tool, whatever way of showing it, as long as it is detailed. It has all the information it needs to have, and it's easy to read and understand. The second page is the table of your EV powertrain components, the costs of them, the delivery, basically all the details that your vendor lists and what is it called? Backup vendors, those kind of things. And it should, like, it's always nice to see your detailed timelines in terms of your logistics. If they're coming from overseas, then how have you, considered those timelines to fit with your development and manufacturing timelines? The third one is your EV powertrain budget, where we want to see all your cost figures and explanations for this. And see, again, this is like a whole page dedicated to your budget, right? So there's a lot of things that you can show, a lot of graphs to explain, to draw comparisons. You can also take, if you have been building, say, a combustion vehicle before this, you can draw inspiration from what was the budget allocated there, why is it different for EV, and how are you trying to, get these additional funds when you are planning to go make an EV vehicle, and what is your strategy for that? So yes, it is, again, open to interpretation. Use this to your best advantage. And yes, the fourth page is, blank in the sense that we don't have any rules as to what we expect in this. That this is for you to explain anything that you think we need to know, and you think that is great, is innovative in your procurement strategy. And we'd like to see it in this page. So I'm limited to 4 pages. Please follow the rules. Like it mentions, don't put a cover page, so don't put a cover page because you'll lose points for that. It's clearly written. So yeah, just read it and just submit 4 pages and make sure it's very clean and easy to understand. Sometimes it's easier to put things in a table, put things in graphs or color code things, because then it's easy for a judge to read, because we're reading 4 or 5 reports. Every judge goes through at least 4 or 5 reports. So beyond a point, all the numbers and everything starts looking similar. So it's nice when you have different ways to represent your data. So it's easy for us to understand. We don't have to put in a lot of efforts in trying to just understand what your report is saying, rather than see beyond just the figures what you're trying to say. So I would suggest that you spend some time on trying to make it presentable. This is a very important part, appendix. You are allowed to put an appendix, but please don't put a 300-page novel in the appendix. We will not read it. We of course, the appendix is to help some of the, say you've done some calculations, you've done some strategies which need more explanation. You put this in the appendix. So, and then we'll of course look at it and read to support what you have presented in the report. But don't expect to put everything in the appendix and expect us to read it and score you on that. Okay, the scoring is done on the first 4 pages. Appendix is only to help to clarify certain things that you might have mentioned in the first 4 pages, and also make the appendix easy to read, put a table of content, put links. So we don't, because usually I've seen a lot of appendixes are so big, and if they don't have a table of content, even if they had an explanation of something that they presented in the report, we're not going to go through those 300 pages to try to find it. So, and please don't put 300 pages. It's a waste of, it's digital, but it's still a waste of pages, because nobody is going to read your appendix as much as they're going to read your report. So make sure your report is the most presentable and concise. And yes, whatever you need to support what you've presented in the report, put only that in the appendix. Last is your question answer session. You get 20 minutes, 5 minutes to set up. You don't really have to spend too much time on introducing yourself. We don't expect a presentation from your side. It's best to dive into the questions as fast as you can, because the judges do have a few clarifications and queries to ask and clarify, and this helps to also score you better, understand your report better. There's 5 minutes for judges' feedback. Most of the times, maybe this time will not be sufficient to give you feedback, or the question answers might go into this, but don't worry, we send written feedback to all teams with your score. So you will be getting a detailed feedback on every section, probably where you've lost points especially, and where you need to improve. You will get written feedback on those points. So, and this will be sent to you post the session. So don't worry about that. But yes, we try to give as much quick feedback, or the most holistic feedback that we can during those 5 minutes. And also, it's good to be prepared for the question answer session, know which team member is going to answer, is responsible for which subsystem, which is responsible for which page. So, when the judges ask questions, you know who's going to answer, and you're ready for it. You're not like, trying to, in the meeting, trying to call out names like, oh, do you want to answer? Do you want to answer? Don't do that. It wastes time because you only have 20 minutes and they go by really fast. So it's best to make the most of this time. And also practice a lot, like have these mock sessions with your team in your colleges, and ask them to like ask you questions going through the report and practice, answering these. And it helps you to have some of your answers ready. It clarifies some of the answers in your mind, so you know what to answer when such questions are asked. So it's always good to practice. Some things to keep in mind is please read the rulebook. The rulebook has everything that you need to know to, have a successful competition. So please read everything that's written in it. Also, as I said before, the longer the appendix, the lesser the chances of it being reviewed. Present things in a way that is very clean and easy to understand in your report. So we don't have to like literally go treasure hunting for the information that you have presented there. And make sure your timeline, like I mentioned earlier, is accommodated in one page. Make sure everything is visible and not blurred and nothing is cut off. Use the 4 pages as effectively as you can. And please come prepared to the Q&A. So these are some of the things that I wanted to draw your attention to and run through the rule book with. There were some questions that we have received, so I will run through those first, and then we will take open questions from everybody. So we have this one question from Abhishek Kumar. I see you here. All right. So one thing you've asked here is how to approach parts which are not available, out of stock, alternate vendors not available. Well, that is what we are trying to see how you deal with this. It will never happen that a part is never available or there are no alternatives, right? For it, you just have to see, like sometimes there might not be alternate vendors available locally. So you'll have to go outside your city or, a little more outside your state and things like that. Another way to do this is talk to your other teams, right? If you're from a particular city, let's say Pune or Mumbai or even any other city, get in contact with these other teams who have maybe not in that Pi EV challenge, who have already probably made an EV car before. There are a lot of teams in India who have made an EV car before, and talk to them about how do they procure these parts, which are the vendors that they approach. Usually teams are friendly, and it's always nice to have this camaraderie between the teams, because at the end of the day, you're trying to make a good car, but there might be some teams out there who already have been doing this for a while and they do know this. So I find that I don't think it's very probable that you will never find a part. It can be available out of stock for a while, for sure. So that is why you need to build like a buffer timeline within your procurement timeline and until you start your development and manufacturing. So you need to have that time between to make sure that these risks are taken care of. But there wouldn't be a way where it's not available at all or there is no alternate vendor. Sometimes for big parts, which are very expensive, there can happen that there aren't any local vendors. You need to go out overseas and get something shipped. So that becomes a little tricky. But then again, you're allocating so much money to it. So we want to understand what are your ways of trying to make sure that that part doesn't fail, or you have ways of making sure that you have how you're managing your funds to get this part, and a backup in the worst case scenario. If it fails, what is your backup? Do you have like a local, not such a good quality version, but a local part to replace it? So this is what I would say for that. The next question is, should we first check maximum fund availability and then consider cost estimation of vehicle, or first estimate the cost projection and then go for funding? See, it's very it's like a cyclic process, right? You have to start somewhere. So if you think it's easier, like if you get funds, if you know your college is going to give you funds, sure, start with that and see what you can get out of it. But I would say it's always nice to design your car first and then see the best in terms of performance, what are the best components that you need and what are the best vendors for this. And then things might be out of your budget. And then we'd like to see how are you making these decisions where you're compromising sometimes on the performance, sometimes on the cost to make sure it fits in your funding. So this is again up to the team, right? There's no right way of doing this. It is, if you know what your fund is going to be, then of course you have to fit your car to match that fund. But if you want to also see, what is the best car that you would make and what is the way cost cutting that you would do, then anyway, you have to design your car and then go from there. So yeah, it's either ways, whatever works for you and your team, I would say. That should be your procurement strategy. The next question is from Ishan Sachdev. It is, what factors are used to justify the procurement decisions for the report? I'm not sure I quite understand what you mean. If you are online, could you clarify what factors are used to justify the procurement decisions for the report? I mean, like if you're asking what are the factors you consider to make a decision, which part you buy, which vendor you buy, what's cost, what timeline. I mean, this is what we are asking you to present in the report. So yeah, the factors actually depend on you and on your team, on what you sort of prioritize over, like what is, every team has priorities, right? You have a budget, you have different, you might have some components from your previous car if you've been making a combustion vehicle. So your factors and of deciding what your procurement strategy or decisions are going to be are very unique to your team. So it kind of depends on where what your starting point is and what are the priorities for you as a team. So yes, I wouldn't say that these are like the factors that you need to consider. Then the next question is, what are the other relevant points we consider in our risk management apart from delivery time and funding issues? Again, risk management is like, of course, we want you to, with the procurement strategy, tell us what is your backup plans for your time, for delayed time and taking these into consideration and your money and cost. But there are also things like, like your parts fail, some of the parts fail during your testing. So what is the backup for this? And how do you make sure that these come in time? So I don't want to give too much details away because then this is like a sort of a little bit spoon feeding and giving you all the things that you could present. So I want you to like think about this and think in a way that, yes, this is the car you're making. What are the possible things that could go wrong? And what are the things that you need to take into consideration to make sure that you make this car by whatever your timeline is to make this car. So yeah, and again, the rubric also explains everything quite detailed, and it has these guiding questions to help you, navigate through this. So yeah, I'm not going to give like very detailed answers for this. Next question is, how many points are there? The extensiveness of the report. If you're asking on how many points are there for how big the report is, like there are 0 points because you have to have 4 pages and that's a limit. How detailed it is, that the points again you saw, like there are different points for the detail and completeness and different things that we judge. So yeah, go through the rubric and you can see the breakup of the points. Next question is from Aruna Shaleshwarar. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. It needs some more explanation on timeline part. Okay, so this is not a question. So if you're online, can you elaborate on this question, please? What more explanation do you want on the timeline part? Okay, so I see another question from Vishwari Sazia. I will address that in a bit. So I'm assuming that the timeline is clear. Okay, so let's go to the next one. This is from Rafif. Apart from the components of the powertrain package, can it be a subassembly, such as vehicle dynamic components, body frame? No, we are only looking, this is a PI EV challenge. So we are trying to see and help you rather to make sure that you know what goes into making an EV car. Usually, if you are participating in this event, that means you all are trying to make the EV car for the first time. So we are only interested for now in the powertrain, EV powertrain package, not the other sub-assemblies. So in your like in your full timeline, of course, we want to see a detailed version of your EV powertrain, but that doesn't mean we don't want to see how your procurement strategy ties in with your manufacturing strategy, right? So I mean, it is dependent. So if you only show how you're procuring parts and don't show the dependencies on your manufacturing phase, then I mean you're going to lose points because we don't know if this procurement strategy actually works for your manufacturing strategy. So yes, in that of course you can show you don't have to show it in too much detail, but you can show in your the different subsystems how they go in line with your procurement timeline for your EV components. But other than that, for your procurement table or we don't want costs and all these details for other subsystems. It's only for EV powertrain. Next question is it okay to include a hyperlink in main page to Google Drive or the web? Yes, it is okay, but I would suggest if it is say an explanation, it's easier. It's better to just put it in your appendix and link it to your appendix, right? Because if you're going to link your entire team's history in that Google Drive, then we're not going to see it. So, so please limit. If you want, of course, you can link things, but I would say it's easier to just link it to your appendix and have everything in one document. So it's easy for us also to go through. So if you think that you've explained something, or if let's say there's a quotation that 2 vendors and you want to show the difference between the cost for the 2 vendors. So just, put those quotation screenshots in the appendix and link it to the appendix. So it's easier for us to find it. Yeah. Next question is from Mohammed. Make sure the timeline is accommodated in one page. Is it for the overall timeline or for one division? Because each divisions have different timelines. So is it okay? Of one page is for one? No, it is one page for everything, everything. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes when you make it in a software or make it in Excel, and when you try to reduce it into one page, it becomes very small, which I understand, but it's okay if it's small, okay? It's okay when I'm looking at my laptop screen and if it's very tiny and I can't read it and I have to zoom in, it's fine, we will zoom in. But once we zoom in, it should be visible, it shouldn't be blurred and things shouldn't be cut off. But it's okay, if I'm looking at the zoomed out version in my screen and if it is very tiny and I can't read it, it's fine, as long as I can read it when I zoom in and see everything clearly. So yes, everything has to be in one page. Like I said before, your procurement timeline has to be very detailed for your EV components, but the dependencies that it has on your other components and your manufacturing timeline, that can be, in not so detailed. It can just be one line item for each. So it just shows us the dependencies on these things. And you show the EV procurement timeline more in detail. So yeah. That was the timeline. And now there's a question from Vishwa Races Electric. If we are manufacturing any part within workshop, which consists of very minute components and very less cost, then do we need to mention yes. If it is in your EV powertrain, I would say it's best to put it in. But if it's part of your EV powertrain, okay, so understand again, in the EV powertrain, see your wires and fuses are part of your EV powertrain, but the mounting of that on your chassis is part of body and frame. So if you're talking about manufacturing these mounts in your workshop, and if you should include the costs of those, no, because that goes into your chassis and body, I think it's called, that section of your cost. When you make a usual cost report, if you have made it for your combustion vehicles, there are different sections for subsystems. So all the mountings and all those things go usually in your chassis and body and framework. So So yeah, if it's that, don't include it. But if it is anything to do with the EV powertrain that you're making it in-house, do include everything. Because if you see a part, however small it is, like even like if it's a tiny wire or a fuse, and if you see if it's missing in your procurement strategy, procurement table, then we're like, oh, that means they haven't considered it. They don't know if you have to use this. So for us, it means that you don't know about that part or you're not using that part. So it's best to put everything in. All right. So I think those are the questions that we have right now on the sheet, and the other questions we received. Are there any more questions that you'll have right now, or any other more questions that you've received?
Nikita, there is this question on YouTube. In procurement report, do we have to mention components as detailed as we mentioned on cost report DBOM? And also, if we are still uncertain about our funding. These were the two questions.
Okay. For the first one, about if they have to be as detailed, yes, they have to be as detailed for the procurement table, but again, for only the EV powertrain, not for the other parts that support your EV powertrain. Usually it is your mountings, right? So those no, but everything that's part of your EV powertrain, yes, it has to be part of your procurement table, and it has to be as detailed as possible. And the second, sorry, can you repeat the second question, Anita?
Yes. If we are still uncertain about our funding, I think it's kind of incomplete.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, if you mean to say that if you should include the components on your table because you're not sure if you'll get the funding or not to buy that, I mean, of course you have to, irrespective of you're not sure of your funding, because if you don't say receive 10% of your funding, doesn't mean that, oh, I'm not going to put this fuse in, oh, I'm not going to, it's not like that, right? It's a complete system. So you need to put in your entire system. So you have to show, if that's what this is what your question is, and this is how I'm understanding it. But yeah, that would be my answer to that. Are there any more questions?
No, Nikita, not on YouTube. If anyone would like to ask any question, you can put it up on the chat. We'll have Nikita answer it.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have more questions about rubric or your timeline, or I don't want to give away too many, detailed answers, especially like, what to include in your strategies and things like that, because that's what we want to see from your side. Then if I say one thing, then everybody just considers that thing, and all the other things are forgotten. So that's not nice. Okay, we have one question. Do we need to mention cost of sponsored components in the report, if any? Yes, it's always nice to see when you present like a BOM, it's usually the cost of the part, irrespective of where you're getting the money from it, right? Consider you're like an actual company that's making a car. So you have to include all the costs, and then say, like in your budget allocation, when you're explaining, like, this is the money that we got sponsored, this is how we're trying to raise the remaining funds, and this is which components cost how much. So it's nice to see, because you need to have the awareness of, even though some of the components might be sponsored, you need to know how much it actually costs. Maybe this year, you had a tie-up with the company and it was sponsored for you, but in the future, if you want to make the next car, it might not be sponsored. You might not have that tie-up with that company again for them to give you the component. Then you need to know what is the cost of the component and what impact it can have on your total budget. And, so you need to develop this understanding of how having some parts sponsored and not sponsored, and buying something from a particular vendor and, from say an overseas vendor, how these things affect your the quality of your car and the cost of your car. So it's important to have this understanding. So yes, please do mention these things.
Nikita, we have two more questions on YouTube. The first one is, do we have to consider the virtual budget or the actual one which we are being allocated?
What do you mean by virtual? Which we have been allocated. That means, if you get a budget from the college, then I guess you have to work with that. That's how your team works. But I don't understand what you mean by virtual. So if you mean that, that is again something, if this is how I understand it, like if you mean your virtual was what you planned and probably you did not raise that much money, and then you had like an actual budget, this is what we want to see. Like we want to see what was your planned budget, what you probably managed to raise, and then what were the decisions you took, which are the parts that you had to compromise on to fit in the new budget. So we need to see this difference between your first budget, your planned budget, and then your actual budget, and things like that. So yes, do include it.
Thanks, Nikita. The second question is, do we have to mention our each and every sponsor and how we are receiving in parts for or money from them?
No, I mean, we don't really care so much about who's sponsoring you, who's not. But yes, if it's a component and if it's like, part of your procurement table, sure, mention it and mention like what is your total sponsored budget out of your whole budget and all. But no, we don't want to know like detailed information about your sponsors and all. Whatever is necessary to present your data and support your data, include that. Like somebody had Abhishek had asked before, do you mention costs or sponsored components? Yes, if you're mentioning the cost, then you will need another column to say, right? Like this is sponsored. So in the total budget, this cost is not showing, or this isn't, you don't consider this cost in the total budget, or it shows as a sponsored cost in the total budget. But yeah, like names and things, if you don't want to share, it's fine. It's okay. We don't really want to go into such details. It's up to you.
Thanks, Nikita. I think that's about it. Teams, do you still have any questions, or we are good to go?
They were waiting for more questions. One thing I would like to say is that, see, I know like there are, two winners for this challenge at the end for the procurement strategy, but honestly, this is more than just trying to win this challenge. It is more about getting feedback from the judges, especially if this is the first time you're attempting to make, or even if it's your second time you're trying to make a EV vehicle. Our aim is to try to help you, through this procurement strategy, to understand how things happen practically, how actually it works on the ground, and trying to understand the risks that happen when you're actually procuring parts from different, say sometimes different countries, different vendors, different might not be local if your team is based in a city which does not have a lot of industry. So we want you to understand the actual practicalities of this process, and when you enter the industry. So at the end of the day, you're all going to gain something out of this and gain some good feedback, which will help you ultimately to make a good car. So come with an open mind and come with this thing to like learn and get as much feedback as you can. So yeah, that would be my advice in this sense.
Nikita, there is just another question on YouTube.
Yeah.
Do we also have to show proofs for sponsorship, like bills, mail for the same?
No, like I said, you don't really have to, because see, we're not checking like, oh, have you done this correctly? Are you being truthful? See, if you're not truthful in your report, it's going to, if you don't have a sponsorship, and if you say you have a sponsorship, it's nothing to us. In the future, if you really don't have a sponsorship and if you want to make a car, how are you going to raise that money? So it's on you. So you don't have to give us that information. We don't need proof of if you really have this sponsor or not. What we want to understand is how you work with having this kind of money and how you're using this money to make a vehicle. So like I said, if it's good to mention like in the table the costs, and if that cost is sponsored, then it doesn't shows up as a sponsored cost, not as a cost to the team. So these kind of things, if you think over there you want to mention a few names, mention it. But we don't need emails, and don't put this in your appendix. Please don't put it in your appendix. Like somebody said yes, or your MOU or things like that, not required. like I said, this is a challenge, but this is a competition. But this is not like we're not trying to see the correctness of your or like how truthful you are being. We trust that what you're presenting is what you're actually doing, because we want to help you with the process. So as long as you understand the process, it's beneficial to you. I see a question here. What would be a good buffer time to order the components that would need to be imported from your experience, as they might not be as same as expected? And also they might not be the same as my experience. So let me put it that way. It depends on a lot of factors, where you are located, especially where you're getting this from. There's like a lot of custom things that customs takes some time, and when you're clearing those and you have to fill some forms for those things. So yeah, I cannot tell you what a good buffer time is to order this. It is for your team to work it out. You need to consider what are the dependencies for your particular component for the future development of your car. Like if it is dependent, other components, other parts, other manufacturing is dependent on this component. You need to decide when do you want to order it. If you foresee some challenges, like previous years there was COVID, now there is a war happening. So if you see that this is going to affect because your vendor is located somewhere where there is something happening, or there is a possibility of a delay, you need to decide what is a good buffer. You might have exams. So of course, you're in college, so you have exams. You need to consider your exams too in your timeline. You can't. This is something that I would like to say people really skip sometimes. But yes, we're asking you to believe that you're an actual team, but you're also like an actual company, but you're also actually a student. So it is a practical thing that you have exams. So please do factor in your exams, because they do affect your actual timeline. So these kind of things, I cannot tell you what is a good buffer. It's for you to calculate. And this will also change, like I said, from team to team. It's not going to be like same for everybody. It depends from, if let's say you're in Mumbai, things are much, like in a way, in the logistics way, delivery timeline, where you are going to cut down, say, on a lot of internal logistics, right? Because you're at the port, you can go more easily to the port. If you're located somewhere else in India, or like, in another, I'm just giving an example of India, but then it's going to take that road transport time. So these are things that you need to consider depending on your location and the vendor's location and other factors like this. So I hope that answers your question. Are there any more questions?
Hello. No, Nikita, I think we are good to go. If there are no more questions, there's one. Does a buffer budget need to be presented under budget allocation?
Yes, everything. See, everything that you're doing has to be explained. Like I said, I don't mean that if we want proof of what sponsors, we want proof of where you're getting this money from. If your college is actually giving you money, we want to see proof of that. No, but practical things that are going to affect you making your car, like you do need to consider some percentage of a buffer when you plan your budget, because not necessarily you'll always get that money, or you'll always land up getting that sponsorship. So you need to have backup plans. You need to have buffer budget in case of things go wrong. Let's say, unfortunately, when you're testing, say something breaks, you need to go back and get money for that, and you can't just raise money in a day. So you need to make sure that you have money. So yes, these kind of things you do need to show, which helps us to understand that you understand the process.
Thanks,
Last
Nikita.
questions.
Yeah. I will just give it a minute.
Yeah.
We have another question on YouTube. Does the timeline have to fit within 1 year before the next competition, or can we have, let's say, 2 years for building the actual EV, considering our internal team timeline?
It has to be your internal team timeline. So if you plan to, now we're in 2022. So if you plan to, participate in 2024, yes, show your timeline until then. It's like what you're actually doing. So if you're planning to participate in 23, that means a lot of the things actually have already happened for you. So in your procurement stage, at least should have happened until June. So yes, then you'll show us your actual planned timeline and what was your real timeline, what was, things that went wrong. So yes, it's on what you are doing, actually.
Cool. Thanks, Nikita. I think we can end the session. Looks like the questions are being answered. So thank you, Nikita, for making the time. Firstly, it is a pleasure to have this session. And thanks to all the teams for joining in. In case you still have any doubts or questions, please feel to write to us. Thank you. Thank you all once again. I will now end the session.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend and see you in June. Bye-bye.